Welcome back to the Wordsmith's Forge with me, Mr. Hodge. So today, for today, we have a new set of components, a new set of parts, and which ones do I have for you? So first and foremost, we have tracked. Tracked means to draw or pull. It also means drag. It also means draw out. You might be familiar with some tracked words, so be thinking about those because the other root for today is going to be Vink and Vince. Now that does come in two parts, okay? So you have Vink and you have Vince. And both of those mean conquer, right? And perhaps you're familiar with one of Julius Caesar's old sayings, Vini, Vidi, Vici, which means I came, I saw, I conquered. Which, funnily enough, I just thought it was some magic phrase from Doug on Nickelodeon years ago, but it turns out that it was actually a saying of Julius Caesar. So Vini Vidi Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. And Vidi, you might actually be familiar with words like video, but I digress. Moving right along. Prior knowledge check. So please, good time to pause if you want, and say, okay, I already know these words, all of these words that incorporate either one of these roots. But just to give you something to help you along, if you're struggling with that, you might know the word tractor, the farm implement, the farm machinery, rather, because tractors, at least originally, were designed to pull or drag things along. That's what their intended purpose is to drag, right? We also have invincible. We like invincible, especially in athletics or military history. And also convince. Perhaps you've had to persuade, and this is actually an interesting thought, is that if vince means conquer, then persuade and convince aren't exactly synonymous, are they? One is, I would say, convince, I would say, is maybe a little bit more aggressive in its usage. It's more of like aggressive persuasion. I don't know. Something to consider as always with words. And there's a graphic or two actually that are going to be very relevant to these roots, right? Tractor, old tractor, probably one of the original John Deere's there. And then, of course, who better to apply a word like invincible or in any kind of conquering sense than the Roman legions? Right? Now, on to our prefixes. And remember, prefixes are used to shorten phrases into a single word, right? So that's what we use prefixes for. And today's prefixes are going to include con, meaning with and together. We also have ex, being out and away and from. Actually, in this case, it could be an or sense. So it doesn't have to be. It can be a combination. There you. We'll just say it like that. This can be a combination effect. In can be in and into, or it can also add that negative connotation to a word, being that it's not, right? And we'll get to that with words like invincible, but inadvertent, right? Because inadvertent means, it wasn't my intention. It was it was not intended, more or less. Re being back and again. And as I like to say, re is our recurring prefix because we see it time and time and time again. It's always coming back for more. Aha, aha. All right, all right, all right. And another picture, if you're not sure of what that is, it is a mine, right? Why do I have a picture of mine? Maybe this will make more sense later. But if you guess it, kudos to you. All right, suffixes, also an important part of word building, of word smithing. Why? Because a suffix, in addition to certain other things, it also modifies part of speech. This is how you take verbs and turn them into adjectives, or adjectives and turn them into nouns, or nouns into adverbs, so on and so forth. This is how you modify that part of speech. So the suffixes for today are going to include able, meaning able to be, and we also have ion, being an action or process, but it can also impart state, quality, and act to the so in either of those instances, those semicolons, they differentiate on that. Okay, so it's either an action or process. So it's either that section, or it can be that it's a state, a quality, and or an act. Okay. And the graphic going along with that. What is this? Well, if you're not familiar actually with science graphics and things like that, this is actually an image of how muscle fibers work. Okay, this is actually a graphic example of muscular contraction. Aha! Hopefully you know that word too, contraction. And again, if you're into athletics or anything along those lines, you'd be very familiar with muscular contraction, right? Or maybe you've and depending on the age of the person, this could be really iffy, but maybe you've also given birth, her contractions, or seen, witnessed childbirth, or, your mother, well, obviously your mother has given birth, but do you remember, something along those lines? Anyway, without getting too graphic, muscular contraction, her contractions are 5 minutes apart. That's where those muscles are actually pulling together. They're pulling together, right? Biology lesson for the day. Hey, who thought you would be stopping by vocabulary and get a biology lesson? But biology lesson for the day, muscles actually do not push anything. Well, Mr. Hodge, I push things all the time. Well, it's funny, it's almost counterintuitive, but it's actually rather logical to consider this, that when you yourself are pushing something, you have groups of muscles that are contracting to create that motion where you push. But your muscles actually don't push anything. Your muscles don't push apart. Your muscles create motion by contracting. That's why they operate in pairs. Biceps to triceps, quadriceps to hamstrings, so on and so forth. And whether or not they go one way or the other, they work on those joints to create motion in one direction or the other. I know, right? Who thought you would be learning a lesson in biology today coming by for vocabulary? All right. Oh, and before I get into today's definitions, one other thing you're going to want to be aware of, excuse me, able and able. Okay. I didn't make notes of this, but pay close attention. Able and able. Okay. Both suffixes mean exactly the same thing. All right. The problem that can arise with those is that there is no set rule that says, in this instance, you use able, and in these other instances, you use able. I did say that right, able versus able. Anyway, there's no rule that says you have to use one or the other. Now, that being said, there is a specific list. There's a specific list of words that use both. Now, the interesting thing about those specific words, like defensible and defensible, I know, can you tell the difference in what I'm saying? And I'll stress this. Defense-able and defense-able, as in defense-able, right? Both of these mean able to be defended, okay? The difference is that with defense-able, we use that in abstract applications. Are your ideas defensible, right? Are they able to be defended, okay? Ideas. See, they're abstract. They're not concrete. Now, if you were talking about a group of soldiers that were defending a position on the battlefield, is their position defensible or defensible? Sorry, defensible. Right? Good examples of the difference in the usage. And there are other words that also fall into this category where able and able actually have slightly different applications. Okay? Thought I'd get that out of the way, but I'll try to include that in later lessons if you're bouncing around through these. All right, so today's definitions. Number 1 is to pull or draw out from. Number 2 is to draw together. Number 3 is able to be pulled or drawn out from. Number 4 is the process of withdrawing. Boy, am I stumbling over my own tongue today or what? It's the process of withdrawing, or it could also be used to mean pulling out, okay? Usually you hear this in relation to military operations. Number 5 is unbeatable or impossible to overcome, okay? Number 6 is to persuade by argument or evidence. Maybe you know what that one is too. A couple of these I think are going to be fairly obvious, but others you might want to work on a little bit. Okay. Number 7 is able to be conquered or able to be made to agree with. Now this is kind of a odd word in the sense that I don't know, people don't use this one too often, and maybe because it sounds awkward or something. I have come across this in reading, whether it's in relation to historical events or just maybe perhaps how easily people are persuaded at times. Good examples of that. Number 8 is to draw or pull back. Number 9 is the process of pulling back. And number 10 is the act of drawing together or shrinking. So some of these you might know, some of these you might not know. Don't neglect your word parts, but go ahead and take a pause. Now's a good time. Take a pause and try to work some of this out. Okay? You don't need me to give you all the answers. I'm sure you all are educated and smart, intelligent, competent people, right? Give yourself a minute. Try to figure some of those out. Okay, so hopefully you gave yourself a moment to do that. Moving right along. Check your work. Here are the answers, those of you that would like to know that just couldn't manage to figure it out. It's okay. We don't all know everything. I certainly don't know everything. Okay? I try to educate myself and be knowledgeable about what it is I'm presenting here, but I don't know everything. So anyway, moving right along. There are the answers in order. Oh, wait a minute. Why, by the way, I'm doing this deliberately and I will continue to do this in my videos. Why? Because I am a proponent of taking notes. So even as you're watching this, you can keep a running list, guys. Have a chart. Part of it that is dedicated to prefixes, part of it's dedicated to suffixes, part of it that is dedicated to roots. Okay? Because 10 words is by no means the end-all, be-all of any and every word that is ever going to incorporate these roots. All right? By the way, if you've been paying attention, tractor was one of the example words that I listed on here, but it's not on the list. Because tractor was not a definition in today's list, and yet it is a word that uses tract. Okay? Okay. And by the way, another good reason of keeping that together is as you start to compile these lists, these different parts of various parts of words, you might recognize other words. It's like, hey, wait a minute. I know this other word, and it starts with re. Okay, but what are the other parts of it? And then you might say, okay, well, tract, right? Okay, retract, retraction, retractive, retractable. See? There's some words on there that aren't on the list. So, anyway, to make things easier for you, I went ahead and put the definitions back in on the other side. So, number 1, extract. Extract. And wait a minute. I am committing a grievous error. Extract and extract are two different things. Now, the image that I had up there, was an extract. An extract. Notice that's a noun. An extract, right? Like extract of vanilla, extract of orange peel, extract of lemongrass. If you've ever gotten into the baking supplies and stuff like that, if you've ever gotten into baking, then you know about extract of vanilla, at least, hopefully. Extract. Notice the difference in pronunciation. Number 1 is extract, as in to pull or draw out from. Like that picture of a mine. You see, that's why we build mines, is to extract the resources out from deep in the earth, whether it's coal or iron or, and don't stop, steel is not a naturally occurring element. It's an alloy. Okay? Hey, that's why we're here, forging, right? We're forging words, forging metal, so on and so forth. You see the correlation yet? Hopefully, anyway. I know, am I talking fast enough yet? Extract, to draw or pull out from. And I know I reversed the order of that, but notice it's to pull, to draw. Okay? Verb infinitive. You would conjugate extract, right? Number 2 is contract. Now notice, contract and contract are two subtly different things because contract is to draw together. It's an action. It's a verb infinitive. A contract is something that you sign. And remember from the previous page, I had that one of those. Contract, right? The muscle contract. The graphic showing how a muscle contracts versus a contract, that document that you sign. It's legal, it's binding, so on and so forth. However, both of those do mean roughly the same thing. A contract is a document that draws two parties together, whereas contract is a verb. Okay? Contract is a verb. It's what your muscles do. It's also what building materials do when it gets really cold out, so keep that in mind. And that's why the cracked asphalt was because those cracks, in part, are caused by the expansion and contraction of the building material in extremes of temperature. On hot days it expands, on cold days it contracts. See, contracts, verb, and that's in part what leads to cracking, right? In roads. Number 3 is extractable, all right? And this is able to be pulled or drawn out from. I mean, quite literally, able to be drawn or pulled out of, right? Out from. Is it extractable? It's kind of why we like metals. It's kind of why we as human beings, we like metals, because they're easily extractable from the earth. Well, maybe not. In some cases, you have to do really deep mining for it. But nonetheless, they are extractable, right? You can pull them out of the earth, out of the rock, and you can process them. Right? Number 4, extraction. You might have guessed that one. Actually, that was one of the easier ones, I think. So anyway, process of withdrawing or pulling out. Right? The soldiers needed to get to the extraction point. That's the place where they get pulled out of the combat zone. Right? And the extraction point. Okay. Number 5, invincible. I think this one also was relatively straightforward. Not able to be beaten. Unbeatable. Not able to be beaten. Not able to be conquered. Possible to overcome. Kind of like what people for a long time thought of the Roman army. They really believed that the Roman legions were invincible. And then one of the biggest defeats of them, I think, was in the Teutoburg Forest, right? And that kind of put that to the test. We'll put that name to the test. And maybe you saw 300, maybe you didn't. But anyway, ultimately, yes. The invincibility of the Roman legions was ultimately proven false. So for number 6, we have convince. And you might have already known that one too, because convince is to convince somebody, is to persuade them by argument or evidence, right? And so keep in mind, it's like persuade, but it's a little bit more than persuade. Because sometimes you can persuade somebody without argument or evidence, right? And that's why convince gives it's a word that has a little bit more oomph in the realm of persuasion, because you didn't just persuade them, you convinced them, you conquered their mind with your ability to reason and some inherent evidence or something along those lines. I might want to reword that, but nonetheless, hopefully you get the idea. Convince is a little bit stronger of a word than simply persuade. Number 7 is convincible. Now this is an odd word. I don't hear people use this one in like regular like speech. I don't think I've ever heard anybody refer to someone else as being easily convincible, or maybe it was more difficult. They're more difficultly convincible. Is difficultly even a word? I think so. If it's not in the dictionary, it should be. It has the right parts and it says what it says. Okay? So convincible is able to be conquered or able to be made to agree with. So see, able to be convinced, right? Able to be convinced or able to be conquered, right? And again, convinced does have that connotation of conquering. Number 8 is retract, to draw or pull back. So like what the landing gear on the aircraft typically do now is they retract. This is why retractable landing gear in aircraft was a really big development, actually, because in flight it reduces the drag on the airplane. I mean, before that, you had fixed landing gear on like the biplanes and stuff, and it slowed them down. It's just more drag in the air as you're flying. Retract actually can also be used though in it kind of sort of like an apology. right? You might retract something hurtful that you said to somebody. You might take it back, right? You might draw it or pull it back. Um, it can be used as as a form for apology, right? It can also just be meant to take something back from somebody that you really aren't on good terms with anymore, right? Hey, you remember when I asked you to, or when I told you I'd help you move your sofa? Well, I retract that statement. I retract that offer, right? So again, it's not just an apology in that sense. You can just mean it to use it. You take something back. Number 9 is retraction, which is the process of pulling back. Now, this is kind of an interesting one, retraction, because there's a process involved with it. Kind of like when a accredited news source has to issue a retraction. And I really do like this word because it's really eye-opening. Because accredited news sources are legally obligated to tell the truth. And I'll stress that once again: accredited news sources have to tell the truth. Right? They can't knowingly lie. They can't knowingly engage in falsehoods. And what's another hot button word? Spreading disinformation. Accredited news sources cannot do that. They're legally bound to speak the truth. So this is why, once upon a time, you would find that newspapers would issue retractions, not just because on something major, but maybe it was like they printed a story and new information came out about it, which kind of invalidated the old information. So an accredited news source would actually have to issue a retraction and say, something to the effect of, well, due to new evidence in relation to such and such instance, event in history, we're having to issue a retraction so that the correct information is out there. Okay, so you have that. Last but not least, contraction, and again, the act of drawing together or shrinking, right? What muscles do, what building materials do when it gets cold out, so on and so forth. Contraction. Okay? All right, so hopefully you were able to come up with some sentences of your own. Okay, hopefully. And as always, if anything in here is inaccurate, you disagree with, maybe you just even don't understand, please feel free to leave some comments and we can get a discussion going. I do enjoy a good discussion, especially when ideas are bounced around, so on and so forth. So, as always, this has been the Wordsmith's Forge with me, Mr. Hodge. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you next time. Till then, take care.